for folks that miss it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so again, thank you so much, Anthony, for the opportunity to share my knowledge and cross-pollinate knowledge with folks in the meeting and folks listening to this recording. I've known you now, Anthony, I think about 5 years. I think we
Yes.
met at the beginning of the pandemic, and thank
Yes.
God we all survived.
I passed the
Uh,
exam.
and you did pass the exam. That's awesome. So yeah, thank you so much. I We have a mutual friend, David Gittins. I've known David for almost 20 years now, since he joined the HISPI program. So thanks for the opportunity. And I have never been to Barbados, but every time I've never met anyone from Barbados that is a bad person. And I think obviously the opening prayer at the beginning of the meeting just really makes me feel at home. It kind of reminds me of where I came from, Nigeria. I don't think we start any meetings without praying. Even when we have people of different faiths and beliefs, we'll still observe, give thanks to the Almighty and invite Him to our meeting. So thank you so much for not only the welcome, but kicking off the meeting with a prayer. Because prayer does work. I'm a living testimony of that. So let's talk about AI. So as Anthony mentioned, I'm the founder of the Holistic Information Security Practitioner Institute. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been around as a program for about 20 years, but the institute itself was started 18 years ago. So can everybody see my screen? I just want to make sure that you see what I'm sharing. So you should
So
see
you
a
should
slide.
see a slide. Yes, we can.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect.
All right. So before I start, I want to hear from you all, considering I actually have way more time than I thought. So I want to just take the opportunity first of all to hear from you. And then I think that's pretty much going to set the tone for the session. And I would also like this session to be interactive. So I have a tendency when I'm presenting to pick on folks just to make sure that we're all staying engaged. So I'm going to put three questions in the chat, and I'd love to be able to get your responses. So if you want to just respond, so if, for instance, if you believe AI is more of a threat, so I personally believe AI could be both a threat and opportunity, right? So I always say both, but I don't want to give you that luxury of saying it's both. I want you to tell me from your experience, from your perspective, is it more of a threat? Is it more of an opportunity? So if that's your response to say it's more of a threat, then just put one threat or one T. And then that's the first question. The second question is, does your security awareness program or the one you build for your clients, does it include AI risks? And so it's a yes or no answer, right? I don't think you want to put not applicable. I think it's really more yes or no. Or if you feel like you have a different perspective, definitely share that. And then does your incident response plan, does that include AI incidents, or is it just cybersecurity related incidents? So I think I would really love to hear from you in that regard, because I think that's going to really help me hone in on the areas of the presentation that I really need to focus on. All right. So pretty much HISPI started this think tank 2.5 years ago called Project Cerebellum. So the cerebellum is the brain that is behind our brains. So if you want to learn more about Project Cerebellum, just go to projectcerebellum.com. And that's a HISPI project. So for about 8 years now, HISPI started a program to help more minorities, veterans, and women move into cybersecurity roles, right? So we have phase one, phase two of a program, which you can also learn about on the HISPI website, hispi.org. And then 2.5 years ago, we decided to tackle another challenge, which is AI adoption the AI race is really, was really starting to heat up about 2.5 years ago. And we felt like if it's not done safely, securely, in a responsible and trustworthy way, it could actually create more problems than solve problems. So we decided we needed to start a think tank. So I scribbled the idea on a notepad. I was taking a sabbatical, where I pretty much shut down my laptop, shut down my phone for 24 hours. I do this every 2 weeks, and I've been doing this now for almost 3 years. And I think it was like my 13th sabbatical. So it was actually 6 months into starting those bi-weekly sabbaticals, typically on a Monday. And I found out that I was watching a squirrel at the top of a tree. And so that's really how the idea was inspired. So I'm going to leave that cliffhanger. If you want to know more about that, just go to projectcerebellum.com. But the whole idea is the cerebellum is the brains behind our brains that gives us balance. And within 90 days, so I put together a list of folks that are within my inner circle, people I've worked with, former bosses, former colleagues, some of my direct reports, in my various CISO roles and deputy CIO roles. And I said, okay, if I ask 20 people that I trust and I really know and trust, if every single one of them says yes, then I know I've got a good idea. But if one says no and says, no, this is a terrible idea, then I'm just going to scrap it. Lo and behold, every single one of them said yes. So I didn't really have a choice but to start this project. And 90 days after we started the project, we held our first inaugural meeting, April 2023. We actually launched a trusted AI model. We use the word model, but it's really more of a framework. It's an AI governance framework. And that's what I'm going to be talking about and sharing with you. And then October last year, we launched the Trusted AI Model Score, which is also known as TAME Score. So the whole idea is we want to tame this AI beast so that it doesn't create more problems for us than, solutions, pretty much. So that's pretty much the tone of the gist of what I want to share with you all. All right, so AI has risks. There are inherent risks with any type of technology, whether it's cloud, whether it's the internet, whether it's even, when we moved from, machinery to like the computer age, there's always risk. There's risk of, data compromise. There's risk of malicious use, malicious access. But those risks need to be known. You need to be able to identify those risks. You need to be able to quantify those risks, and you need to be able to prioritize those risks in terms of mitigation of those risks. So the risk of AI is real. It could be a powerful tool to reduce the workload of employees, not replace employees and organizations, but there are also risks that you need to be aware of. And just a little bit over 2 years ago, the Australian Research Council had to send out a message to their respondents. So they issued like a research grant. And when the research grant came in, they started seeing or the responses to the research grant, almost like a solicitation. They started noticing that a lot of the language was similar, or even in some cases, almost like a copy and paste. So they've actually found out that the respondents to the grant were using ChatGPT to respond to the grant solicitation. This was supposed to be a confidential, non-public solicitation. So they literally had to send out a message to those respondents, and actually all the respondents saying, what you're doing may constitute a breach of confidentiality. And this is just one example of what generative AI can do. Like it's good, but at the same time, if it's misused, it could actually create not only breach of confidentiality, but potentially integrity and availability of data. And this example is more of a nuisance, right? It's not, nobody died, nobody was seriously harmed. But as a think tank, our own belief is that AI should cause no harm. It should enhance the quality of human life, and it should proactively, or by proactively adopting our AI governance framework. So every time we talk about this impact statement, or every time we share it, whether it's a CISO panel discussion that I typically moderate on a panelist of at major events, especially if you have folks from the defense sector, the defense industrial base in the US. one question always comes up. What do you mean by harm? And for a long time, I kind of struggled with that question because I'm like, as human beings, like we should all know what harm means. And then somebody had to explain to me because I'm not a former military guy. I never served in the military. And they said, in the military, we actually, there are war fighters that their mission is to cause harm. If they're targeting, let's say, a terrorist or some sort of enemy of the state, right? They're going to want to inflict harm on that, on that subject. And so they said, your statement says cause no harm. What if they were using AI? What if it was some sort of automated, maybe a drone attack, right, against the adversary that was leveraging AI to identify, maybe do a facial recognition of that adversary to make sure that the wrong individuals don't get, harmed. So AI could be used in that kind of scenario. So I said, okay, what we mean by no harm is no unintended consequences or no unintended outcomes. So we had to pretty much clarify that. So harm generally means what the AI is built to do is what it's doing. So in that warfighter scenario, if it's actually programmed to identify a terrorist or an adversary and take out the adversary, then it's not really harming, the world. Well, there's probably political debates about that, on philosophical debates, but it's doing what it's intended to do. The challenge with that thinking is that now the bad actors could say, yeah, if I'm scamming people, if I'm targeting people with AI generated ransomware, I'm not really causing harm because that's what my intent was for using, building that AI system or using that AI system. So the jury is still out on what that universal definition of harm needs to look like. But from my viewpoint, we're looking at it really from an ethical standpoint, right? What is harm in terms of if you're on the good side, you're not the bad side with the bad actors, the hackers, the criminal hackers, the hacktivists, the folks, the nation state that are intended to, cause problems and mayhem. If you're not on that side, if you're on sort of the good side, which is also subjective, right, to some extent, harm would be unintended outcome of using AI, using that AI system to benefit folks and serve the people that it's designed for. So our vision is providing effective guardrails for safe, secure, responsible, and trustworthy AI use cases. So if you notice, our focus is specifically on use cases. So we're not trying to assess AI models or AI algorithms or whether it's generative AI, whether it's large language models, we're trying to assess or provide tooling for assessing the use cases for that AI system. So it could be something as nascent as using ChatGPT. What are you using ChatGPT for? Or what is your organization or your client using ChatGPT for? And are they doing it safely, securely, responsibly, and in a trustworthy way? And ultimately, our mission is to be the foremost thought leader and advocate for enabling harmonization of best practices, standards, and frameworks for AI ecosystems. So as you can see from the diagram on the right-hand side, we have different layers of governance, risk management, trust, and then lifecycle processes. So the whole idea is we're bringing all these different frameworks, ISO, NIST, NIST AI, RMF, we're even looking at things like OECD, right? So we're bringing all these frameworks together, the HIPAA, SOC 2, NIST cybersecurity framework, and I'm going to share that with you as we progress in the presentation. But the whole idea is to harmonize all these different silos so that you actually have the best of breed to be able to assess your AI risks. So we have 4 domains within our trusted AI model, and those domains, according to the NIST AI risk management framework, they're referred to as functions. So NIST actually calls them functions. So there's govern, there's map, there's measure, there's manage. So at this point, I'm going to pause because I think I'm sort of starting to deep dive into what a trusted AI model, what it's about and how we actually help folks leverage it as a tooling or as a resource for assessing AI risk. I'm going to pause to see if anyone has any questions about anything I've said so far. And I'm just going to look at the chat to see what the responses are to my initial poll. Okay. Do speak up if you have any short thoughts, any points you want to make, or anything you want to share, or any insights that you have.
Just if we wonder where would you see, and I know sometimes maybe think of governance, people think about data privacy, and sometimes what they call fairness, where um, fairness in the outcome, where
Yes.
a certain groups are not marginalized, and especially if they're using old data, if you were using data that goes back to, and the banks have a lot of data that probably goes back like a couple of decades,
Yes.
but that data is skewed because depending on which part of the world you pull that data, an ethnic group, say Afro Americans, would have been marginalized financially in the 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
So if you're using that data to help build and come forward, then that bias permeates all the way through the model because of the training data.
Yes.
How do you would have to make a conscious effort to sanitize that data or at least put some correcting feature in there so that it is a fair outcome to all the demographics that it would be serving, especially in approval of loans and mortgages and stuff like that.
Very well said, Anthony. This is what actually that's one of the principles. So we actually have 7 principles that we've harmonized within our trusted AI model, and fairness is actually one of the principles. I believe it's transparency and fairness, because if the data doesn't represent the folks that you're currently serving, you really have to question whether that data is complete. So even though you may not intentionally discriminate against the folks that you want pattern. I mean, so let's go back 100 years. Like, I mean, how many people that are people of color had bank accounts 100 years ago, right? None of us was around. Hopefully, well, I'll speak for myself. I'm going to assume none of us was around 100 years ago. But the people who probably had bank accounts 100 years ago, I don't know when, I think the Federal Reserve passed the Banking Act, probably there about that time or the early 1900s. A lot of those people were probably wealthy people that had bank accounts, right? And the biggest challenge they were always trying to avoid was a run on the bank. Because if those people decided to pull out their money, the bank would literally go belly up overnight, right? So that's a really good example, Anthony. Like fairness is extremely, I would say it's probably one of the most important, but it's probably one of the most ignored. So we actually use the word impartiality and fairness. And so if we have enough time, I'm actually going to dive into the spreadsheet itself to kind of give you a visual of how that maps to all these controls. But that's a very important one.
John has hand up. John?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to agree that that's a great example of it. And what I love about Ty's model is from a business standpoint. So my business concentrates on data privacy, right? And as we bring in AI technologies, that should be a part of the risk, right? In GDPR, there's a risk score, especially those things that are going to deal with humans, right? Like, is this going to affect your ability to get a job, qualify for an apartment? But for every AI technology, part of our risk assessment should be how is it trained, because that's extremely important. for things like that or biometrics, if it hasn't been trained on your features, it may be 60% accurate. But if it's been trained on your features, it could be 95% accurate. So that's a great topic. And Ty, I know you have some other stuff, but if you can elaborate on that a bit, I think that
Yeah.
is something that benefits us all.
Awesome. Well, when we get to the end of the presentation, I would actually pull up the spreadsheet and I'll show you how many of the 72 controls within the NIST AI RMF, which is really what we're using as our foundation, how many of them actually maps to that principle, fairness and impartiality. You're going to be stunned when you see that. Or maybe not. But I think that's going to really help bring it home. And then obviously across the four domains of functions, you're going to see a lot of focus on fairness and impartiality. So let's put a pin on that until I've been able to at least get through the presentation. But great points and great observations. All right, can you still see what I'm sharing? The four domains?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the four domains, if you're familiar with NIST cybersecurity framework, this is similar to the NIST cybersecurity framework. So I think they now have 5 or 6 functions, and I believe govern is the first. So yeah, so it's a little bit, it's NIST, it's the same organization, but they just created this additional ones just to be able to focus on AI risks. So that's pretty much what we use as our four domains. But when you do an assessment, the assessment again is on that use case for AI, not the model, not the algorithm, specifically for your use case. All right, so the spreadsheet I'm going to share with you, this just gives you like a visual of what that spreadsheet looks like. It has 73 rows and over 30 columns. So it's very, very detailed. I mean, it's something we built over 2 years. But I think when we first launched it in July 2023, I think we had about 20 columns. It's grown by at least 10 more columns since then. So I think 1.0 is kind of the core. We're currently at 3.0. We just launched 3.0 at the end of July. And we typically do updates at least 2, 3 times a year. So I think the next one's probably going to be 3.1 in probably the January, I'm thinking probably April timeframe, either January or April timeframe. But it's looking more like April will be 3.1. And some of it is like just minor tweaks here and there. So, all right. So I know this is a bit of an eye chart, so I have to apologize initially for overwhelming you with this. But there are 20 controls within our trusted AI model that we really say, if you do nothing else, you got to at least take a look at these 20 controls. So if you look at, so I'll just walk you through what I'm showing you here because there's a lot of data everywhere. On the top left is the mappings to regulations. So HIPAA, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, PCI DSS, which is really not a regulation, it's more of a standard, but apparently some states in the US have actually made it a regulatory mandate. SOC 2, EU AI Act, EU GDPR, the White House AI EO. I apologize. I know there's a cybersecurity regulation in Barbados, which we don't have mapped yet because we're still sort of focused on the US and Europe. But at some point, you're probably going to see us include that in our crosswalk or mappings. So Govern 2.2, the risk statement is pretty much the why. Why do you need to have that particular control? So auditors like to say, I'm a United Nations auditor. I've been doing independent audits for them since 2009, so about 16 years. And so every time I am part of the team as an independent consultant, typically in my spare time, every time we go out and audit an entity, it could be like a UN, the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Haiti, it was called MINUSTA. It no longer exists, by the way. Or the one in Liberia, somewhere in Ivory Coast, So every time we go out and do those audits, we're tying our controls to actual risks. What is the risk that that control is trying to mitigate, right? So if we're looking for, let's say, password management, it's trying to mitigate the risk of password compromise. Pretty much it, because password compromise could lead to unauthorized access. So ultimately, the risk is, or the threat of password compromise, but the risk is unauthorized access, right? So every control should tie back to a risk statement. So we sort of created risk statements, even though NIST actually hasn't provided those, but we extracted from the NIST AI RMF and we provided a risk statement for each domain. So Govern 2.2, Govern 2.3 all have the same risk statement that you're reading here. So let's talk about that for a minute. So ensuring a purpose-driven culture focused on risk understanding and management. So what we're talking about specifically here is AI risk understanding and management. So if your response to my initial question is your incident response plan does not include AI risk management, your security awareness training does not include AI risk management, you really ought to rethink that, right? If it does, great. That means you're proactive. You're not waiting for the proverbial fill in the blanks to hit the fan, right? You're being proactive. You're staying on top of things, right? That's usually where you want to be. But if you wait for things to go wrong, then typically what happens is you end up, it creates more headache and you actually end up, it costs you more. It could be more in terms of pain. It could be more in terms of reputation. It could be more even in terms of financial cost of responding to that incident. So making sure that your incident response plan, even your tabletop exercises, includes what happens if AI goes wrong? What happens if AI goes rogue? Right. So we're not talking about adversaries using AI against the organization. We're talking about your own use of AI or your organization's use of AI going wrong when you have unintended outcomes or consequences or outputs based on it could be something as nascent as using Gen AI like ChatGPT. So obviously to mitigate that risk, you need to have controls. So one of the ways you do that is you have an accountability structure to make sure that the appropriate teams and individuals are empowered, responsible, and trained for mapping, measuring, managing AI risk. So typically, you may have a chief responsible AI officer, or you could have a chief AI officer that pretty much is part of their function. They're also responsible for managing AI risks. So making sure that your personnel and partners receive AI risk management training. What does that look like? So one of the things we're currently working on, and this is still very early, is a way to gamify TAME score, pretty much a trusted AI model score platform, where you're not just answering a series of questions, like a subject matter expert, but you're faced with like a scenario, almost like an incident response type, a tabletop scenario where you actually ask questions like, this happened, what do you do? And then based on your response, it'll give you a score. And then at the end of the day, you'll be able to, it'll issue you like a certificate. And based on your score, it'll determine whether you're a novice, whether you're an expert, or, I think there's about 4 different levels, a practitioner, and then there's a higher level. I've forgotten what that is. But we're kind of building that we're partnering with a company in Brussels to do that. And so we're probably going to be launching that probably within the next 30 days. And initially, it's going to be free as well. So if anyone's interested in seeing that or maybe doing a sneak peek, just hit me up offline. So the key thing is just having that training, whether it's gamification, whether it's your traditional, I call it death by PowerPoint type training, just have something, right? Have something in place. It could be lunch and learn. I was talking to Anthony earlier on, and we were chatting, and he said, hey, we're thinking about doing a lunch and learn in October because I think you did one last year. Awesome idea. I mean, I always say anytime you you bring lunch and you invite me to a meeting, 9 out of 10 times I will show up. And I'll typically show up mostly for the lunch, but I also want to network, right? So, wink, wink. If you decide you want to have a lunch and learn, and I'll be, of course, happy to come to Barbados for that. So the whole idea is providing like a role-based type training and also making sure you have policies, procedures, and agreements in place. So I focus more on this because this is almost like the foundation. And then as you can see on the right-hand side, you have the ISO mappings as well as the regulatory mapping. So Texas actually passed a law in the state of Texas in the US in June that from January 1, 2026, companies that do business in Texas or do business with Texas residents, Texas is probably one of the largest states in the US, have to comply with the Trusted Responsible AI Act called Texas Responsible AI Act, AI Governance Act, TRIGA. So on the bottom, you're going to see the mapping to people, process, data, technology. So that particular control is going to require that you leverage people. You have processes in place, like like your SOPs, your standard operating procedures will typically have those processes, the what and the how you do things. And then also the data, you have to be able to look at the data to make sure the data is impartial and there's fairness in the data. So to Anthony's point, that's a very key area you're going to be focusing on. And then there has to be inclusion. It has to be inclusive. And then security and privacy has to be part of, obviously, your considerations when you're implementing that control, as well as reliability and safety, as well as robustness. So in the parentheses that you see after the 7 functions, and this pretty much just shows you the mapping. So apparently for this particular control, you don't actually need to address impartiality and fairness, because at this point, you're just setting policies, kind of top down, but you have to ensure transparency, you have to ensure accountability, you have to ensure security and privacy. So it just kind of gives you an idea of when you're implementing any particular control within the NIST AI risk management framework, which is obviously what we have in our TAME framework, you have to, what exactly they're asking for. That's the whole idea. So there's 19 more of this. So I'm not going to spend too much time like diving into every single one of them. But I also want to talk about how did we arrive at the top 20? Like what process do we actually follow to get to those top 20 controls? So I'm just going to quickly scan through what they are across those 4 domains. But if anyone has any questions, I think this would be a good time to ask while I sip my tea.
My question, Taiye.
Yes, sir.
Is how available is this framework mapping that you are going through here to persons who might be interested in it?
It's 2 clicks. I'm here.
Sorry?
Okay. I'm hearing an echo.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I was asking how available is this framework that you're going through? How available is it for persons who may be interested in it? In a sense, how do we get access to it?
Okay, it is 2 clicks. Let me see if I can do a quick stop sharing this screen, because that's a very important, that question I typically always forget to answer until the very end. And usually we run out of time. So I'm so glad you asked. Who asked the question? Sorry, I didn't see your name. I could just hear the voice. Charles. Okay, Charles. So that's a really good question. So I'm going to share something with you real quick. Bear with me. So to answer your question, it's just 2 clicks away. So you'll be able to go to our Project Cerebellum website and you fill out. There's a pledge we asked for, and we actually just introduced that pledge, I think, last month, because we felt like folks were just like checking the box. So we felt like, okay, just checking the box and they're downloading it, they're not really using it. Let's actually make them commit to something, right? So even though it's not legally binding, there's really no way we can enforce that pledge, but it's like an honor system, right? So we created this. So if you go to projectcerebellum.com, if you all can still see my screen, just go to downloads. And when you click on Trusted AI Model 3.0, it's going to ask you to fill out your name, your organization, your email. You click the checkbox. You say, I'm not a robot. And you'll be able to download the file. So it's really that simple. It's free. We're not charging anything for it today because it's a community built open source work product. So right now it's free and it's readily available. The same thing with the presentation that I'm presenting. I actually had it uploaded to the download section today. So if you click on that, you'll be able to fill out, but you have to fill out, like the form for every download, pretty much. So I'd highly recommend you download all the 4 files that we have on that download section. We're constantly refreshing them, but these are the most current files that we have. Will be the first 2 that you have here. So Charles, does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. All right, so let's go. Let me just quickly scan through because I really want you to see the spreadsheet itself, and then we can pick on that principle, fairness, and impartiality, and see how much coverage we have within our trusted AI model for that particular principle. So let's move on to 6.1. So, and then so every single one of the 20 maps to real-world AI incidents, so things that have actually gone wrong when it comes to AI. So that's why we chose this 20. That's why we're not showing you all the 72, but just the 20. So one thing you're going to see common to every single one of them is that they either map to they map to at least 2 of the people, process, data, and technology. Every single one of them does. So what does that really mean? That means there's no technology solution, like there's no control you're going to find in here that only maps to just technology. It's always a combination of people, process, and technology. So technology is not going to solve this problem. Like this is not one problem we could say, yeah, if I bring in the tools, now I have good AI governance. No. I was talking to a CISO that said, it was actually a state CISO, is one of our think tank members. He spent his vacation with us recently, and we had a whole week of just really sharing and, reminiscing on a lot of things that HISPI did in the past. And one of the questions that came up is, how do you know out of your 80,000 employees in your state, how do you know who's using AI? And his question was, I don't know. So I said, okay, but you do have a data loss prevention program. You do have in filtering web traffic, you do have a CASB solution. He goes, but with the cloud, with AI, even the tools that we allow, we don't know which one of them has AI capabilities. So he said it's a blind spot for us right now. And in his mind, he doesn't think any technology would actually be able to get a full handle or a good handle. And then it goes, okay, what if I know? Am I going to block them? Am I going to stop it and potentially break business? So for him, it's a case of, okay, we're going to develop policies. We're going to develop procedures. We're going to approach this top down. We're not going to just say, no, you can't do it. We're actually going to govern this thing and educate our users on how to do it safely, securely, responsibly, and in a trustworthy way. And that's just one example of so many of folks that are members of the think tank that have provided this type of feedback. And then, so there are 2 governed controls that maps to the top 20. I believe there are 5. Yeah, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 that maps to the map function. And then there are I think about 7 that maps to manage. And I think the last 3 or 4 maps to, measure. I missed measure. There are 7 that maps to measure, and I'm just going to count this: 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then there are actually 8, 9. And there are 4 that 5, I think 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't count. 5 that match to manage. So those 20 consist of 2 government controls. I think it was 5 map, 9 measure, and I believe 5 manage. I think that's the breakdown. I think it's something like that. But you can do the count when you access the presentation itself. So at the minimum, these are the ones for every AI use case that you're considering or you already have in place. These are the ones you want to assess yourself against. If you do nothing else after this presentation and you take this knowledge back to your organizations, at least take a look at these 20 controls. All right. So in October last year, we launched a tool. We're branding it as the Trusted AI Model Score. It's currently a free tool. So if you go to the website, and I'm going to just quickly walk you through it instead of boring you with the screenshots, I'm going to show you examples of the ones that I've actually done, using more or less fictitious data, no real customer data or anything to kind of showcase, how you can potentially use this as a tool to assess AI risk for your different use cases. So I'm going to pause to see if anyone has any questions while I try and access the tool. Don't be shy. I know somebody's thinking about something. I'm sure something's come to your mind you want to ask. So please do not be shy.
No, one of the things I'm thinking about, that same shadow AI thought, I mean, is something that we all kind of face,
Yes.
where we have shadow AI and we're wondering, do we need to have AI usage policies within our organizations to tell people at least, yes, we may not be able to 100% stop you from using ChatGPT or Copilot, but
Yep.
don't upload confidential company data to train the model on. Um, I think a lot of companies are facing that dilemma
Yes.
and I think Sony got hurt with that, where they were uploading confidential proprietary information into a Gen AI model.
Yeah.
But I know like security awareness training, AI is being rolled out in my organization as part of the security awareness training.
Yes.
But because AI governance, as I do my research on it, it's not a one-person job. It's not even a two-person job. AI governance requires a team, but
Yes.
in our Barbadian context, we can't afford teams. So I'm
Yes.
wondering if an AI usage policy is enough of an effort to mitigate against the risk.
It's a start. It's not the be all end all. I wish I could say if you do that, you don't have to do anything else. That wouldn't be, yeah, nothing could be further from the truth. That wouldn't be true. It's a start. So what I recommend to organization is you already have an acceptable use policy. Just put verbiage in there about AI use. So maybe just create, hey, these are the 10 things you should not do when it comes to using AI. Like it could be that simple. So these are the 10 no-nos or 10 do nots, right? Start with that because I bet, and you could actually start with the ones that maps to the use cases we talked about, like the AI incidents we talked about. So we have 12 prominent AI incidents that we tracked. Start with, okay, these are things you do not do based on those AI incidents. And I feel like to me, that would be the low-hanging fruit because if you try to institute almost like an entire governance program, people are going to resist it. So you want to almost start with what you have, fill in the gaps, and then start to roll out a proper governance program.
Okay.
Yeah. But your acceptable use policy will be the first starting point, because that's already typically codified into the way the company runs, and folks are kind of, I've yet to find one single company that said, our employees don't want to follow acceptable use policy. I may hear, hey, some people are asking for exceptions, right? Because their job requires they bypass the aspects of the policy, right? That's fine. I mean, you're always going to have exceptions to any policy, but you just have to have it as a formal process so that not everybody starts to ask for an exception. They have to actually justify that need for an exception.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to log in. I think we're at the top of the hour. So how much more time do I have, David? I want to be, sorry, Anthony. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know you blocked 2 hours, but is it okay to continue going for maybe another 30 minutes?
Yeah, I think so. I think you do 30 minutes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so so I'm going to log into the TameScore platform. So when you go to the website, you click. Actually, I went through that too fast. So if you go to just go to the home page, every page is like a menu item. So if you go to TameScore, it's going to take you to the section. And if you click on kind of just a verbiage to explain what it is, it's a self-assessment platform. And so you have the option of logging in with your Gmail account. Now, if you want to use a private Gmail, no problem at all. Or you can log in with a Microsoft account, which could be any Microsoft account, pretty much. I wouldn't recommend using the admin account, though. So I would say any general user account, that is with Microsoft 365 would suffice. So I've logged in using my Gmail for this demo account. And so we don't store any of the passwords. Everything is done using API to Microsoft and to Google and Microsoft, or Google or Microsoft. So these are the assessments that I created. And what we're really trying to do is make it easier to digest what we're trying to do. So the spreadsheet could be a little bit overwhelming. So we're trying to actually make it a little bit easier to digest. So I'll just show you real quick, like the assessment actually looks like, okay, yeah. So this is the assessment profile that I created for TAME 2.4. We're currently at 3.0, which is going to be added this month to the platform. But 2.4, which is the previous version, is already there. So you can literally say, okay, I want to do an assessment against the top 20 controls, and I want to be able to distribute the questions. So it's pretty much questionnaire driven. It's a relatively, binary, yes, I have this, no, I don't have it, etc. But it actually tells you what the objective for each control group is. So within the domain, you have a control group, or I would say a subdomain. So on the govern, you have govern 2, you have govern 6, and then you have map 1, 4, 5. So the top 20 falls under those control groups. So it could be, you can assign one individual like I did to every single one of the control groups, or you can have a one-to-one. So I can say, hey, Lisa or Anthony is the one that is responsible for govern. I'm going to assign this to him. So he gets the email, he gets access to fill out the questionnaire. So the whole idea is to avoid sending back and forth emails and actually use the platform to collect the assessment results. So this data we actually use to benchmark. So it would actually allow you to say, okay, how do I compare against others that are in a similar industry and similar demographic, or maybe even in the same country? So that's what that's used for. But we don't reveal somebody else's data. Everything is all, behind, obviously, role-based SaaS, right? So nobody sees the data you're actually entering. But because the database collects all the data, we're able to provide that benchmark information without you necessarily seeing somebody else's data. All right, so I'm going to make that screen a little bit bigger. So instead of just saying, yes, do you have it? No, I don't have it. We also look at the maturity level of each control. So we leverage CMMI, where you can say, okay, yeah, it's initial, it's very ad hoc right now. We're looking to mature that control, or you can say it's defined, we're at a fairly high level or, fairly mature. And then if you're at 5, you got to be able to prove that you're at 5, because that means you've optimized your processes. You have metrics. I always say you have metrics on steroids, right, at that point. But I would say realistically, most people would probably never get beyond level 4 for any type of control, because at that point, the juice may not be worth the squeeze, right? It may just be too costly, to get your control up to that level of maturity. So we look at all those things, and then once you fill out the assessment, you'll be able to actually go in and generate reports. And I'm just going to share with you real quick before I do a deep dive into the spreadsheet, which is pretty much the data behind everything you see. So for instance, this shows you, for the data I enter, which is all fictitious data, it shows you they have a score of 228. And that score is a poor score. So now they have a high AI incident probability. So there's an algorithm we have that we've used for almost 20 years for cybersecurity ratings, and now we're applying it to AI risk ratings. So we can almost predict that an organization that has this type of score has a high incident probability, an AI incident probability based on this score. So ideally where you want to be is you probably want to be at a solid 3, which will put you at a medium low incident probability, or maybe slightly above 3. All right, so I'll just quickly share the rest of the reports, and then we'll look at the spreadsheet. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to interrupt me while I'm switching between those reports. Okay, and the spider chart pretty much shows you where you are from a maturity standpoint and where you ought to be. So ideally, you want to be somewhere between 3 and 4 on a maturity scale of 1 to 5. Okay. All right. So the next one is compliance. And I always say compliance is not equal security. Maybe in Barbados, that really resonates with you all, but in the US, you constantly have to preach that message because we're very, very compliance driven. But I always say compliance is like the tail. Security is the dog. Compliance should not be wagging the dog. The tail should not be wagging. So compliance shouldn't be driving security. Security should be driving compliance. So security is the dog and compliance is the tail. Dog should be wagging the tail, not the other way around. So if you're secure, you're going to be compliant as a byproduct. But some companies still want to see what the compliance score looks like. So we provide that as well as part of the reporting. And any of this you can copy and paste. Any of this could be customizable. If you decide you want to host the platform yourself or for your client, we can customize everything you see here in terms of the features and functionality. For this particular instance, we don't allow exports. I mean, you can copy and paste images, you can do print to file, but we actually deliberately don't allow exports because from a legal standpoint, we don't want any record that could be discoverable on the part of the folks that are doing the assessments. So we intentionally haven't done that. We have a lawyer, at least 2 lawyers that are members of our think tank that pretty much hold that position. So we kind of defer to them on that one. So I don't know. I just showed you the benchmark score, but I think I may have gone through it too quickly. So I'm going to generate another benchmark score. And all right, so this shows you have a score of 800 and the average score is 414. So you're almost double the average. This is really where you want to be. Like, major corporations will probably pay a lot to be at this point. But obviously this is a fictitious corporation. So, all right. So trending pretty much allows you to trend your score over time. So you could do an assessment, let's say once a year, it could be twice a year, it could be quarterly. And then by looking at the trending report, you could actually see how you progressed or regressed over time. So I'll just quickly, sorry, I'm kind of rushing through this. If anyone's interested in like maybe a one-on-one walkthrough or deep dive, I'll be happy to schedule that with you. Just reach out to me. I'll provide my contact details at the end. Actually, it's on the final slide, but I'll still provide it in the chat. Okay, so this, to me, this is like your punch list. This is the ones that says, okay, these are the gaps you have, based on your responses, and these are the actual incidents that have occurred because of these gaps. And it actually gives you the actual link so you can actually see what those incidents were about, and obviously be able to apply those to your environment so you're not making the same mistakes. I'm just going to quickly click just some random bias. I think that was about the AI generated Seinfeld show. Yeah. So you can actually see the real world use cases. So one of the things I said is for your acceptable use policy, you can say, okay, from the 12 incidents in the our trusted AI model, I just want to create like a do not, no or do not list. And I want to incorporate that into my acceptable use. I think to me, that's what I would do if I was in your shoes, like start somewhere. It's not going to cover everything, but at least start somewhere and just give folks an opportunity to kind of ease them into your AI governance program. I think that's it for as far as the platform. Does anyone have any questions, any requests, anything, any feedback? I'm pulling up the spreadsheet as well while I wait for feedback. Okay, I'm seeing, I think I may have changed the view gallery. Okay, I need to change the view. So I can see my own screen. I don't know why. So I'm going to share another screen. Is somebody else sharing? Strange. Okay,
You can still see the time score screen.
Okay, all right. I think
you have to stop sharing that one first.
Okay, perfect. I'm switching that now. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so I think I may have changed my view. So I'm actually seeing what I'm sharing, and it's kind of doing my head in. So let me see if I can stop that. Although it doesn't really matter. Okay, can you still see my screen that I'm sharing?
You're saying it's don't focus on you, so you're not sharing anymore.
Okay. Let me do that again. Okay, I'm a creature of habit. So whenever something changes, it just throws me off. Hold on. All right, I'm using a split screen, so let me move stuff around a little bit. Okay, so you can see the spreadsheet now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is the spreadsheet I didn't want to show you from the beginning because I didn't want to scare you off. But this spreadsheet has 73 rows and over 30 columns. And so we talked about impartiality and fairness, right? So let's go through the spreadsheet and let's do a search. Let's narrow it down to how many of the 72 maps to impartiality and fairness. 31, almost 50%, at least 40%. So that's a major, major focus for the NIST AI risk management framework. So if we also want to filter down to how many of those 31 are top 20 controls, half of them, 13 of them. So out of the 31, there's 13 you absolutely want to have to ensure fairness and impartiality. And you have that in pretty much in this column. So it actually explains what those incidents were and why they're important from a fairness and impartiality standpoint. So, I mean, there's different ways you can use the trusted AI model. This is just one way I would use it. If, for instance, maybe you have a program that is based on, I don't know, PCI, and you say, okay, I already have an existing PCI program. How much coverage does that have for me from an AI risk management standpoint? The easy way to do that is to just go to the spreadsheet and unfilter or remove the filter for partial and impartiality, well, fairness and impartiality, and just go filter by PCI DSS. I hope I'm not going too fast.
Very good.
Okay, so there are 59 controls within AI risk management framework, which is obviously the foundation for a trusted AI model that maps to PCI DSS. So if you already have a PCI DSS program, which I'm going to expect at least one person, out of a group of 10 people, has a program that is aligned with PCI DSS, because most organizations process credit cards, especially if you have consumers as your customers or B2C. So in that case, you'd say, okay, you have a starting point. You could say, okay, how do I leverage my PCI program? This AI risk management or AI governance could be an extension of your PCI program. And out of the PCI programs, controls, how many of them maps directly to the top 20? Every single one of them. So that's just one way I would use this as a tool when you're doing those types of assessments or projects. So I think that's the gist of everything. There may be things I may have missed, but I feel if we maybe open it up to Q&A at this point, I may be able to remember the things that I forgot. All right. Any questions? I'm going to throw it open at this point, and if you need me to reference any of the previous material, I'll be happy to do that as well.
I'll just make a comment before the others start. I think I've been looking at crosswalks for a long time, through various scenarios. I think this is one of the better done crosswalks that I have seen, and even to include real world incidents, really, I mean, it gives it that extra thing that, it's serious, that, it's just not theoretical, but instances that I've actually haven't maybe ignored these particular controls. So I like that, and I like the detail of the crosswalk. It takes a lot of work to get a good crosswalk done across so many controls and different frameworks. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. So, the funny thing is, one of the things I actually enjoy doing the most in this industry, believe it or not, is this crosswalks. But I think it's because of the DNA that HISPI has. I mean, I think you've been through our training, you're HISP certified.
Yes.
We dive into almost every single control framework out there for cybersecurity and I'll say IT governance and IT service management, ITIL, COVID, COSO, NIST, ISO. I think I mentioned ISO before, but different ISOs. So I think understanding the point of view of every framework and every standard and even regulations are the toughest ones because the language sometimes is just like, huh? But once you get past that initial shock of what are they really asking for, confusion, and you start to see the trees from the forest, it's like the light bulb just goes off, right? So actually one of the things I enjoy doing the most is actually taking those different frameworks and seeing how they all like marry and connect with each other. A lot of times they're saying the same thing, but they're just using different language. And there's a method to do that. And the good thing is I lead the harmonization working group. So I would say half of the effort is really me, but also getting others who are way smarter than me to validate what I'm doing. Because in the past, I would just do a crosswalk. I'll provide it to a client. Client would be like, that's great. I'm like, there's got to be a feedback. Like, what am I missing? They're like, nothing. But it's because that's not their world, right? So having the think tank of folks who are way smarter than me to actually brainstorm and enhance and refine, the things that I actually naturally, strangely enough, I enjoy doing has really helped. And then we also want to keep it simplified. So one of the things we're working on, and I said I may share this at the end, is gamification of the TAME score. So there's like a 12-minute video that Joanne actually helped me record. So I'm going to give you the sneak peek of that. But I think at this point, I would probably say we stop the recording. Actually, if there's any questions, I'll take the questions. If there's no more questions, I want to share that, give you that sneak peek of what that gamification looks like, and also get your feedback as well. So any more questions, any more comments, thoughts, feedback?
I think it was a very comprehensive presentation, and the tool is certainly something that would be very, very useful in industry. So yeah, I think yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to do a call to action at the end, so please wait for it, because we have a think tank member from Barbados. I don't know if you all know David Giddens, but we would love to get more. David is awesome. I mean, is my brother from another mother. Would love to get more representation from, I'll say, in general, your region, but I'll say specifically in Barbados. So I would really, really encourage anyone that is interested to join the think tank. So when you go to the website, just click on Join Us. That request would actually come to me and Partnerships Working Group lead, and they would typically approve that within a day, which would allow you to participate in our monthly meetings. And then once you've attended a few monthly meetings, we meet once a month on the fourth Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. At some point, we're going to change it to a weekday, because it's about the only time my phone doesn't ring. That's why we meet on Sunday afternoon. So, but yeah, I'll be interested in having, folks in this group and beyond, join the think tank and really help enhance what we're doing. Because I think what we have right now is just a start. Okay. I heard Charles.
Yeah, are there?
Unmute, Charles. Sorry about that. Charles, unmute. Charles, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, Anthony. Taiye, I was asking, are there any special requirements for persons who are wishing to join the think tank?
No. I typically prefer people who don't have any hair left, like me. No, I'm just kidding. No special requirements at all. Just anyone who's interested in this topic. So when you go to the website, you're going to see folks who are CIOs for like entire states and CISOs. And, one of our CISO CIOs is actually the CIO for the United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund, which is the largest pension fund in the world. I've known this guy for 15 plus years. He used to be my client. And he's also the technology advisor to the Vatican, to the Pope, or at least the Vatican. So don't get intimidated by that. Honestly, we have a lot of senior people that are not as much doers. We need more doers. I personally would like to see more of a balance of people who would actually, having those folks lends credibility, but we actually need folks who can actually do stuff and join the working groups, participate in the working group, maybe co-lead a working group. The working groups are also listed on the site. So the only requirement is your willingness to help and advocate and help us continue to improve the work. That's pretty much the only requirement. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
No problem. And then obviously being able to participate in the one meeting, at least first few meetings, and then you can always default to listening. We have a Slack channel that we use to manage our communication. So you could also, if you're not able to make the meetings, you could also listen to the recordings. But I'll say the first few meetings, it's important to join so at least you can have your profile included on the website, because we want to make sure that you don't just sign up, but you actually show up as well. All right, so any other questions? I'm about to pull up the video for the gamification, just to kind of give you an idea. So does anyone have any other questions for me? While it's playing, I'm going to put my contact details in the chat. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. Okay, so we stop. Okay, at this